Peabody's. At that time I was a vice president, and I convinced them that the Peabody in Little Rock should not be a Peabody. We should make it a Marriott. They didn't want to do that, and right about that same time, somebody made them an offer to buy that hotel, so they sold it. That hotel is now a Marriott, so then soon after that, Hyatt made an offer to the Bells family, and they bought the Orlando property. They paid cash for it, made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and all of a sudden, well, Alan retires, and now I'm president, but president of one hotel. Thinking, ship sinking fast. So I put together a proposal for the Bells family, and I said, look, let me use the Peabody name, and I'll go out and find brand management contracts out there where you don't have to invest any money. You just sit back and collect brand and management fees, which are pretty lucrative. So they said, go for it. And so I went out there thinking, wow, this is going to be easy. But every time I was this close to a deal, and I would work for a year and a half working with an owner to get a brand management deal, Marriott or Starwood at the time. Obviously now they're one company, but back then they were two different companies. Or Hilton or Hyatt would come in and they would offer that owner $4 or $5 million to buy the contract. Why? Because they knew in 1 year they'd make it back. So they knew if they made a 10-year contract, the first year they made their money back, and the next 9 years was all profit. But I didn't have the $4 or $5 million to offer up. My checking account wasn't that lucrative. Could offer maybe $40, but what's so funny about that? Yeah. So anyway, I really couldn't get it to work. Anyway, long story short, in all of our travels trying to make deals, we met the mayor of Roanoke. Now you're all thinking, where is Roanoke? Because that's exactly what I said. Who's ever heard of Roanoke? Has anybody here heard of Roanoke? You have? You must be from Texas. No?
I have family in Texas, though.
You have family in Texas, okay. How have you heard of Roanoke?
Is it in Virginia?
No, there is a Roanoke, Virginia. Very good. No, this Roanoke is in North Dallas, and it's right next to a place called Alliance, Texas. Alliance, Texas, back in the, I think, 80s, Ross Perot bought up all this land, something like 7,000 acres of land, and really created the world's largest office park with a huge airport right in the middle of it, Alliance Airport. FedEx and DHL and all of them are the ones who fly in there. But Facebook has 1 million square feet of space in Alliance, Texas. Charles Schwab is actually moving their corporate offices to Alliance, Texas, but Charles Schwab has about 10,000 employees that work in Alliance, Texas. Is it AT Ameritrade or whatever? Their corporate offices are there. The engines that you see, the General Electric engines that you see on trains that are running, they're all made in Alliance, Texas. Most plastic bags in America are all, trash bags are made in Alliance, Texas. Anyway, right next to Alliance, Texas is this little township called Roanoke. I mean, they're literally, you can throw a rock and hit from Alliance, you can hit Roanoke. This township bought up all of the land, in the township, and it is now they call it the restaurant row of Texas or something like that. It's anyway, they have about 30 some restaurants, but they're all independents, all down this one main street, and these are all highly successful. They have any of you ever heard of Babe's? It's a fried chicken. It's kind of like Gus's. This Babe's restaurant does $7 million a year on this restaurant row. Anyway, they have a plot of land right next to City Hall, and you literally can throw a rock from this plot of land into Alliance. And all of the major brands have offered millions to Roanoke because they want that plot of land to build a hotel. But the mayor and the city council didn't want a box brand. They wanted an independent brand. So I happened to meet the mayor at a luncheon, and I said, what about a Peabody? And they went crazy. And I said, but I don't know that we could afford what the land is for sale. And he said, I tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. I'll give you a 99-year lease for $1 a year if you'll build a Peabody there. And I reached in my pocket and I pulled out $100 and I said, you have a deal. And that was the beginning of a friendship, and we've been working on it now about 4 years. And we are actually now, we have all the architectural drawings of it done, the design, everything's done. And now it's out to bid on construction. They're in the final stages, and they're supposed to release all numbers on Monday on the construction part of it. The following Monday I'll be in Texas, and we'll be going through all those numbers. If we're somewhere close to where we need to be, then we will go to market sometime in March and close on the hotel, and we'll break ground probably in April. So knock on wood.
Now, Doug,
There will be a Feathers there too.
you don't have to divulge any secret information, but who's gonna put up the money to build it?
So interesting that you ask. So that was the hard part. So when you're talking about a $180 million project, no one bank wants to finance $180 million because the risk. You can build at least 10 Hamptons for $180 million. And so to a bank, you build 10 Hamptons, the risk is spread out all over the place. You build one hotel for $180 million, there's a lot of risk, so no one bank wants it. So that means you'd need 3, 4, 5 banks to get involved to put the deal together. Well, then that becomes really difficult because everybody kind of wants their debt covered first. It becomes a major thing. And plus you need to put up probably $40 million in equity. I didn't have $40 million in equity, and the Bells, I had promised them they weren't gonna have to put up any money. So, figured out through, remember that name, Robert Colombo? So he told me about a program that's being used and had already been used 3 or 4 times in Texas called 501c3 bonds. And so what I did was I convinced the city that the parking lot and all of the meeting space should be owned by the city. And they could pay for that through municipal bonds, which was about $35 million. And then the remaining part would be done through a 501c3 bond, which is a tax-free bond. And they're very popular right now. They were mostly used for hospitals and things like that, but recently have been used for hotels. So because there were already 3 hotels in Texas that had been done through 501c3s, we kind of went into that and got involved with a 501c3, and so that's how it's going to be paid for. So big part of it through 501c3, the other through municipal bonds. Now I'll tell you an interesting thing. I didn't know anything about 501c3 bonds or municipal bonds, but I asked the question. I said, so when we go to market to sell 501c3 bonds, and you're talking about, I don't know, $130 million worth of bonds, I asked the guy who's handling our bonds, I said, about how long does it take to sell $130 million worth of bonds? And he said, oh, it'll probably take under 2 or 3 minutes. And I said, 2 or 3 minutes? He said, yeah. He said, because they are such popular bonds, what will happen is one or two of these big, huge mutual funds that have billions will buy up a huge chunk, if not all of it, in one fell chunk, because, you know, they're spreading money all over. So that's kind of how, so I thought that was pretty interesting. He said the municipal bond will probably take 2 or 3 days, but he said it'll probably sell pretty quickly, and once they're all sold, then about 2 weeks later you close, and so it's been a learning experience for me. So that's Dallas. The fun part is that we've got to design the hotel from scratch, and I've never really been involved in designing a hotel from the very beginning all the way through. I've opened 10 hotels from the start, but never the 2 or 3 years prior to breaking ground. I always have become involved once we break ground on. So this has been new for me and fun at the same time. If you want to know what the hotel is going to kind of look like, if you Google the Montage Beverly Hills, it looks very similar to that hotel. Same architects, same designers as that hotel, but it's going to have a similar look. Very classic, very elegant, so very Peabody-esque. So that's my story. I've been at this Peabody for 17 years. We have 550 associates, about 75 salaried managers, a name that probably many of you don't know, and don't go back and tell